My name is Rachel Monroe. I was 37 years old when my husband sent me on a cruise with his mother. And on the second night, a realtor texted me, "Are you aware your husband is selling your house tomorrow?" At first, I thought it was a mistake, a wrong number, a misunderstanding. Then the next message arrived. "He has a buyer with him now, and she's wearing what looks like your wedding ring." I was sitting across from my mother-in-law in the cruise ship dining room when I read it. Elaine was cutting into her salmon like nothing in the world could ever touch her son. She looked at me over her glass of white wine and said, "Rachel, you really should learn to enjoy nice things without checking your phone every 5 minutes." I didn't answer, because the phone in my hand had just told me that my husband, Brandon, was back home, walking through the house my father left me, showing it to another woman, while I was trapped at sea with the mother who had helped him send me there. That house was not large. It was not fancy. It was a small blue house on Maple Street with uneven porch steps, a narrow kitchen, a stubborn back door, and a garden my father planted after my mother died, because he said flowers made grief look less permanent, but it was mine, not ours, mine. My father left it to me when he passed away, and Brandon had hated it from the moment the deed was in my name. He never said it that way at first. At first, he called it an emotional burden. Then he called it a financial drain. Then he called it dead money. And finally, 3 months before the cruise, he stood in that kitchen, looked at the cabinets my father had painted with his own hands, and said, "You were never going to do anything useful with that house anyway." That should have been the sentence that woke me up. But marriage teaches some women to translate cruelty into stress. He's tired, he's frustrated, he's worried about money. He didn't mean it like that. I had been translating Brandon for 8 years. By the time the truth arrived, it came as a text message from a man I barely knew. While my husband's mother smiled at me from across a table and told me I needed to stop living in the past. The cruise had been Brandon's idea. That alone should have warned me. Brandon Monroe did not plan trips for me. He planned things that made him look generous. There was a difference. He liked surprises with witnesses, flowers delivered to my office where people could see them, birthday dinners at restaurants he wanted to try, anniversary posts online with long captions about how lucky he was, followed by 3 weeks of barely speaking to me at home. So when he came into the bedroom one Friday evening with a glossy envelope and said, "Pack something nice," I already felt my shoulders tighten. "What is that?" I asked. He smiled. "Your escape." I looked at the envelope. Inside were cruise tickets, 4 nights, 2 passengers, my name. And Elaine Monroe's. I looked up slowly. "Your mother?" His smile didn't move. "She's been wanting to go for years, and you keep saying you need rest." I said I needed help with the school fundraiser. I worked as an administrative coordinator at a private elementary school. My job was not glamorous, but it was constant. Calendars, parent emails, event budgets, permission forms, emergency contacts, staff schedules. I was the person everyone came to when something was missing, late, unsigned, or falling apart. Brandon used to say I was good at making chaos behave. Later, I realized he liked that skill most when his cosquios was the one I was cleaning up. "It'll be good for you," he said. "No work, no house stress, no calls about repairs, just ocean and sleep." I looked at the second ticket again. "Why aren't you coming?" He kissed my forehead. "I have too much going on. Besides, Mom will love it." I should have said no, but I was tired of arguing, tired of being called negative every time I questioned something, tired of the look Brandon gave me when I mentioned my father's house, as if grief was a hobby I had taken too far, and some small, foolish part of me thought maybe this was his way of trying. Maybe he had heard me when I said I felt exhausted. Maybe he was finally doing something kind without needing applause. The house on Maple Street had been the only thing my father had to leave. He was not a wealthy man. He fixed school buses for 32 years, packed his own lunches in a dented metal box, and saved grocery coupons in an envelope he labeled Little Victories. After my mother died, he raised me alone. Every Sunday morning he made pancakes that were always slightly burned on one side. Every winter, he put plastic over the old windows and said, "Not pretty, but it works." Every time I left after visiting, he stood on the porch until my car turned the corner. When he got sick, I moved through hospitals the way other people move through bad weather. Head down, keep going. Don't cry until you reach the car. Brandon came to some appointments, not many. He said hospitals made him uncomfortable. My father noticed, of course. He noticed everything. A few weeks before he died, he held my hand and said, "Don't let anyone talk you out of keeping something just because they don't know what it means." At the time, I thought he meant my softness. Now I know he meant the house. After the funeral, the house became mine. Brandon became restless. He started sending me listings, condos downtown, modern townhouses, investment properties. Think what we could do if we sold it, he said. We're not selling it. We could pay off debt. What debt? Our debt. That was another thing Brandon did. He made his decisions plural when the consequences arrived. His credit card spending became our lifestyle. His failed business course became our investment. His resentment became our problem. But the house remained mine, legally and emotionally. My father's attorney, Priya Shah, had been very clear during probate. The property is solely yours, she told me. If you ever decide to sell, the decision must be yours. I also recommend placing a direct confirmation requirement on the property file. What does that mean? I asked. It means if anyone attempts to list or transfer the property, the closing office must confirm directly with you, not through your husband, not through a relative, you, I agreed immediately. Then, like many protective things we do in moments of fear, I filed it away in my mind and forgot about it. Brandon did not. A few months later, the roof started leaking, not badly, but enough to need estimates. I was overwhelmed with work, so when Brandon offered to coordinate repairs, I accepted. Priya drafted a limited authorization, roof inspection, repair estimates, contractor scheduling, nothing else. She said, this does not allow him to sell, transfer, refinance, or encumber the property. I remember smiling. Brandon would never try that. Priya did not smile back. She simply said, good documents are written for the day people surprise you. That sentence came back to me on the second night of the cruise. The first day at sea, Elaine acted like the trip was a spiritual intervention. She wore white linen, oversized sunglasses, and the expression of a woman who believed every room was waiting for her opinion. At breakfast, she said, you know Brandon worries about you. I buttered toast. Does he? He says you're stuck. In what? She tilted her head with practiced pity. Your father's death, that old house. This need to keep everything exactly as it was. I set the knife down. The house is not exactly as it was. I had the plumbing replaced. She sighed. That's not what I mean. I know what you mean. Her lips tightened. Rachel, a good wife doesn't cling to old bricks when her husband has a plan. There it was. Old bricks. That was what Elaine called the house. Not my father's home. Not my inheritance. Not the place that held the last 25 years of my life with him. Old bricks. I looked out at the ocean. It stretched endlessly blue and indifferent. What plan? I asked. Elaine sipped her coffee. Brandon is ambitious. He needs a wife who understands movement, growth, future. And selling my father's house is growth? She smiled. I didn't say that, no. She didn't have to. That afternoon, my phone kept losing signal. Every time it buzzed, Elaine noticed. Brandon said not to let you work, she said. It might be school. They can survive without you for 4 days. The first message from an unknown number came around 3:14 p.m. Mrs. Monroe, this is Mark Ellison with Ellison Realty. Could you please confirm your availability for a video authorization regarding the Maple Street property? I stared at it. Maple Street. My stomach tightened. I typed back, what authorization? No response. At dinner that night, Elaine ordered wine before I sat down. I already chose for us, she said. I don't want wine. You need to loosen up. My phone buzzed again. Same number. Mrs. Monroe, I apologize for contacting you during travel, but are you aware your husband is selling your house tomorrow? The room went quiet around me. Not literally. People were laughing at nearby tables. Forks tapped against plates. A waiter described dessert to a couple beside us. But inside my body, everything stopped. I read the message 3 times. Elaine watched me. Bad news? I looked at her. Did Brandon say anything to you about the house? Her face did not change. That was the answer. Rachel, she said carefully, this cruise is not the place for another emotional spiral. My phone buzzed again. He has a buyer with him now. And she's wearing what looks like your wedding ring. For a second, I did not understand. My wedding ring was at home. I had left it in the small ceramic dish by the bathroom sink because I was afraid of losing it on the cruise. Brandon had teased me about that. Still guarding jewelry like a museum clerk now, a stranger was telling me another woman was wearing it inside my father's house. I stood so fast my chair scraped the floor. Elaine reached across the table. Rachel, I pulled my arm away. Don't. Her voice lowered. You need to be very careful how you react. I leaned down, close enough that only she could hear me. Why? For the first time since I had known her, Elaine looked uncertain. Not guilty. Not sorry. Just uncertain that the plan was still invisible. I walked out of the dining room. The ship was beautiful in the way expensive things can be beautiful and completely useless when your life is collapsing. Gold railings, soft carpet, music from a lounge, people carrying cocktails with umbrellas. I found a quiet corner near an upper deck where the signal was slightly better and called the number. A man answered immediately. Mrs. Monroe? Yes. Who are you? My name is Mark Ellison. I'm a realtor. I'm sorry to contact you like this, but there are irregularities with the proposed listing and sale of your property. My husband is not authorized to sell my house. A pause. That is what I suspected. My hand gripped the railing. Why? Because the authorization document he provided appears limited. It references roof repairs and contractor access, not sale authority. When I asked for direct confirmation from you, he said you were unavailable at sea and that I was making the process difficult. That sounds like him. There is also a property file note requiring direct confirmation from you before any listing or transaction. Priya. Thank God for Priya. I closed my eyes. Who is the buyer? Another pause. She introduced herself as Vanessa Cole. I didn't know the name, not then. Did she say why she was there? She said she and your husband had plans for the property. Plans. I tasted the word like metal. Send me everything, I said. Mrs. Monroe, I have to be careful. Then be careful fast. Because if my husband is trying to sell my house with a limited repair, authorization, you and I both know what that is, he exhaled. I'll send what I can. And the ring? He hesitated. I may have misunderstood, Mr. Ellison. I have a photo from the neighbor. She came over during the showing and asked why another woman was wearing Rachel's ring. I thought she was being dramatic at first. Then I looked closer. My neighbor? Yes, Mrs. Whitaker. Mrs. Whitaker had lived next to my father for 20 years. She had brought casseroles after my mother died. She had called me when my father's porch light burned out after he passed, because she said the dark looked wrong. Of course she noticed the ring. Of course she protected the house before I even knew it was under attack. Send the photo, I said. A minute later, it arrived. The image was slightly blurry, taken from the sidewalk. Brandon stood on the porch of my father's house, smiling in the polished way he used for strangers. Beside him stood a woman with sleek blonde hair, cream trousers, and my hand on her finger. Not my hand, my ring, my wedding ring. The one Brandon had placed on my finger in front of 90 people while promising to honor me. I zoomed in until the diamond blurred. I knew the small flaw near the band. I knew because my father had noticed it after the wedding and said, "That little mark means it's yours." Perfect things are harder to trust. I pressed my hand over my mouth, not because I was going to scream, because a sound was trying to come out of me that belonged to a younger version of myself. A daughter, not a wife. A daughter watching someone use her father's house like a stage for betrayal. I called Priya Shah. It was late, but Priya answered. Some people become part of your life because they handle paperwork. Some because they are the first person who believes you without asking you to perform devastation. Rachel, she said, I think Brandon is trying to sell the house. She was silent for one beat. Then her voice sharpened. Send me everything. I sent the messages, the photo, the authorization document I had saved months earlier, and the cruise itinerary Brandon bought. While the files uploaded slowly through the ship's terrible internet, Elaine appeared at the end of the hallway. She walked toward me like a queen approaching a servant who had broken protocol. Brandon called me, she said. I almost laughed. Of course he did. You are embarrassing him. He's trying to sell my house. He is trying to move your marriage forward. With another woman wearing my ring? Elaine's face hardened. Vanessa understands him. The name hit differently when she said it. Not surprise, not confusion, familiarity. You know her. Elaine looked away. I stepped closer. You knew. Rachel, my son has been drowning in your father's memories for years. I stared at her. My father's memories are not water. Brandon is not drowning. He is stealing. You always make everything so ugly. No, I said. I keep finding ugly things under pretty words. Her nostrils flared. Brandon deserves a future. And I deserved a husband who didn't send me to sea with his mother so he could sell my inheritance to fund one with his mistress. She slapped me. Not hard enough to bruise, hard enough to make the hallway go still. A man near the elevator turned. Elaine's face changed instantly. She had not meant to do it publicly. That was the kind of woman she was, not against cruelty, only against witnesses. I touched my cheek. Then I took out my phone and started recording. Elaine's eyes widened. Stop that. No. Rachel, don't be childish. I held the phone steady. Did Brandon send me on this cruise so he could sell my house while I had limited phone access? Her mouth opened, closed. You're hysterical. Did you know Vanessa Cole was not a buyer? She stepped toward me. Turn that off. Did you know she was wearing my wedding ring? Elaine lowered her voice. My son was trapped in your grief. Vanessa gave him hope. There it was. Clean, usable, terrible. I saved the recording and sent it to Priya. Then I walked away. By midnight, Priya had frozen everything. Not legally forever, but enough. She contacted Mark Ellison. She sent notice that Brandon had no authority to list, sell, transfer, negotiate, or represent ownership of the Maple Street property. She attached the limited authorization. She attached the property file confirmation note. She attached my written statement from the ship. Then she called me back and said, Rachel, listen carefully. Do not confront Brandon by phone if you can avoid it. Keep everything written. We want his lies documented. I laughed weakly. You sound like my father. Your father sounds like he knew things. He did, then honor him by being precise. So I was at 12:38 a.m. Brandon texted. Mom says you're upset. I stared at the words. Upset. A woman discovers her husband is trying to sell her house with his mistress inside it. And the chosen word is upset, I replied. Are you attempting to sell my father's house tomorrow? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I was exploring options for us. With Vanessa Cole, no answer. Then she's an investor. Why was she wearing my wedding ring? This time, the pause lasted 4 minutes. Then he called. I let it ring. He called again. I rejected it. Then he texted, you always do this. You take one detail and turn it into a disaster. One detail, the house, the false authorization, the mistress, the ring, the cruise, his mother, all of it collapsed into one detail. I wrote back, keep texting. My attorney prefers written records. He stopped texting for 17 minutes. Then the truth started leaking through panic. You don't understand what I've been under. That house costs money. You care more about dead people than your marriage. Vanessa has nothing to do with this. You were never going to do anything useful with that house anyway. There it was again. The sentence from the kitchen. This time I screenshotted it. At 1:22 a.m., Mark Ellison forwarded an email chain. Brandon had written to Vanessa 3 weeks earlier. Once Rachel is on the cruise, we'll have 4 days without interference. Ellison is cautious, but I can handle him, Vanessa replied. And after closing, Brandon answered, after closing we start clean. No Maple Street. No Rachel's father haunting everything. I read that line until the letters blurred. No Rachel's father haunting everything. My father had never haunted Brandon. He had simply occupied a space Brandon could not control. That was the real problem. The house existed outside him. It was something I loved that he could not take credit for, could not redesign, could not turn into a symbol of his ambition. So he decided to turn it into money. The next 2 days on the cruise were strange. Elaine stopped pretending we were bonding. She ate separately. She sent long messages to Brandon with her phone angled away from me. Once, I saw part of one. She's colder than you think. Be careful, colder. That word almost made me smile. For years they had counted on me being warm. Warm enough to forgive. Warm enough to explain. Warm enough to absorb. Now the first time I became still, they called it cold. I spent the rest of the cruise collecting everything. The receipt showing Brandon purchased the tickets. The itinerary showing he specifically booked a package with limited internet access. Elaine's messages telling me not to answer calls. The recording of Elaine admitting Vanessa gave Brandon hope. Mark's messages, Mrs. Whitaker's photos, Brandon's texts, the authorization document, the original email about roof repairs, the property confirmation note, the letter my father left in the probate file. I had not read that letter in months. Priya sent me a scanned copy. I opened it alone on the ship balcony, wrapped in a sweater, with dark water stretching in every direction. My father's handwriting was uneven near the end. Rachel, if you sell this house one day, let it be because you are ready to leave it. Not because someone made you feel small for loving it. That was when I finally cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to remind myself that calm is not the absence of pain. Sometimes calm is what pain becomes when it has somewhere useful to go. When the ship returned, Brandon was waiting at home, not our apartment. My house, Maple Street. That told me everything. He was not there to apologize. He was there to reclaim the stage I parked across the street. Mrs. Whitaker was on her porch. She stood when she saw me. I crossed over and she hugged me without asking if I was okay. That is how you know someone understands grief. They don't ask impossible questions. They just hold you for a second. I'm sorry, honey, she said. Thank you for taking the photo. She pulled back. I knew your father. He would have haunted me if I didn't. For the first time in days, I smiled. Then I walked to the house. Brandon opened the door before I reached the porch. He looked tired. Good. Rachel, he said softly. Soft Brandon was my least favorite Brandon. Soft Brandon was for witnesses, apologies, and lies that needed dim lighting. We need to talk. I stepped past him into the house. Vanessa was not there. The ring dish in the bathroom was empty. Of course it was. He followed me into the kitchen. The kitchen my father had painted yellow because he said our fornings needed help. I was trying to solve a problem, Brandon said. I placed my bag on the table. You created the problem. No. Your refusal created the problem. I turned to him. My refusal to sell my own house? Our future was stuck because of this place. Our future, he rubbed his face. I handled it badly. That's an interesting phrase for attempted fraud. His eyes flashed. Don't use legal language to make me sound like a criminal. I opened my folder. It's not my language doing that. I placed the first document on the table. The limited authorization. This gave you permission to coordinate roof repairs. Another document, the fake sale authorization. This pretended I gave you permission to sell. Another, the signature comparison. This is not my signature, another. The photo of Vanessa on the porch wearing my ring. His jaw tightened. I can explain that. I'm sure you practiced. Vanessa and I. He stopped. I placed Elaine's transcript on the table. His face changed when he saw his mother's name. She had no right to. To tell the truth, she was confused. She said Vanessa gave you hope. His mouth closed. Then, because men like Brandon hate silence more than truth, he reached for anger. You have no idea what it felt like being married to a shrine. I stared at him. What? This house, your father. Every decision had to pass through a dead man. I felt my hands go cold. My father gave me stability. You called it a shrine because you couldn't spend it. He laughed bitterly. You think you're so noble because you keep old things. No, I said. I think I'm entitled to keep what belongs to me. He leaned forward. You were never going to do anything useful with that house. There it was. Again. But this time it did not wound me. It confirmed the pattern. I took one final paper from the folder, my father's letter. I did not hand it to Brandon. He did not deserve to touch it. I read it aloud. If Rachel sells this house one day, let it be because she is ready to leave it, not because someone made her feel small for loving it. Brandon rolled his eyes. That was the moment I stopped feeling married. Not when I saw the photo, not when I read the emails, not when I learned about Vanessa. It was that eye roll, that small, bored dismissal of the last tenderness my father left me. I put the letter back in the folder. You need to leave. He blinked. This is my home too. No, it isn't. I'm your husband for now. His face went pale. You're serious. I was serious when I said no to selling. You just weren't listening. He stepped closer. Rachel, don't blow up our life over a house. I looked around the kitchen, at the chipped tile, at the window over the sink, at the pencil mark on the doorframe where my father had measured my height until I was 16, and pretended I was still growing. This house was not our life, I said. It was the part of mine you couldn't reach. That's why you tried to steal it. Brandon left that afternoon. Not gracefully, he yelled. He called me vindictive. He said I would regret choosing wood and paint over marriage. He said Vanessa had believed in him when I only held him back. Then, 2 days later, Vanessa stopped believing in him too. Mark Ellison forwarded one last message from her to Brandon, sent after Priya's legal notice. You told me the sale was clean. I'm not getting dragged into fraud because you couldn't manage your wife. I read it twice, not because I cared about Vanessa, because it was almost funny how quickly Brandon's future disappeared once my house was no longer funding it. Elaine called me 9 times. I answered once. She said, you have destroyed my son. I said, no. I documented him. She said, you'll be alone. I looked out at my father's garden, where Mrs. Whitaker had helped me water the flowers after the cruise. I was alone inside that marriage, I said. Now I just have more space. Then I hung up. The legal process was not instant. Stories make justice sound like a door slamming. In real life, justice is paperwork, waiting rooms, emails, signatures, and the discipline to stay calm when people who hurt you act offended by consequences. Priya filed the necessary reports. The attempted sale was documented. The false authorization became evidence. Brandon lost access to the property. I changed the locks. I filed for divorce. He tried to claim I had abandoned the marriage by going on the cruise. Priya attached the receipt showing he bought the tickets. He tried to claim I had approved exploring the sale. Priya attached his text saying he waited until I was on the ship. He tried to claim Vanessa was only an investor. Priya attached the photo of her wearing my ring. Eventually, his lawyer told him to stop talking. It may have been the first good advice he ever followed. For a while, I did not know what to do with the house. Brandon had been wrong about nearly everything, but he was right that I had frozen parts of my grief inside those walls. I had kept my father's coffee mug in the cabinet, his jacket by the back door, his toolbox under the stairs. Not because I thought he was coming back, because moving them felt like losing him a second time. One Saturday morning, I stood in the kitchen and made pancakes. They burned on one side. I laughed so hard I cried. Then I opened the cabinet and moved my father's mug to the shelf with mine. Not away. Not gone. Just part of a living kitchen again. Over the next year, I repaired the porch. I planted lavender, marigolds, and tomatoes. I painted the guest room, and eventually, I turned the front room into a small tutoring space for children from the school where I worked. At first, it was just one student who needed help with reading. Then 3, then 6. Every Thursday afternoon, the house filled with backpacks, pencils, snacks, and the sound of children sounding out words at the same table where my father used to help me with math. That was when I understood what useful meant. Brandon had thought useful meant profitable. Elaine thought useful meant obedient. Vanessa thought useful meant available to take. But my father had taught me a different meaning. Useful was a porch light left on, a garden planted after loss, a house kept safe until it could hold something good again. I did sell one thing, the wedding ring. Not immediately. I waited until the divorce was final. Then I took it to a jeweler, sold it, and used the money to buy bookshelves for the tutoring room. Sometimes children pull books from those shelves without knowing what paid for them. I like that. It feels like justice without needing an audience. For years, Brandon told me I was clinging to old bricks. But that house was never just brick. It was every Sunday pancake breakfast, every porch light my father left on for me, every quiet reminder that I had been loved before someone tried to make me feel expensive to keep. My husband sent me to sea so he could sell the last piece of my father on land. But he forgot something. A house can be listed in secret. It can be photographed, measured, discussed, lied about, but it cannot be stolen from a woman who learned to keep the keys, the records, and the truth.